Science 261, Jake, Jack, and Akshay, all here, all at varying levels of tiredness after a great sports weekend in the city, of which we all partook in multiple events. It was a great time. Uh, we're gonna go through what happened with baseball, softball, basketball, swim and dive for at the ACC Championships for tech swimming, and some tennis stuff as well. But before I get there, Dennis Scott, who we just retired his number 4 at McCamus Pavilion, and Bunky Henry, who, if you know your Georgia Tech golf from many decades ago, was one of our better golfers. I believe he's played in a Masters. Both him and Dennis are going to be inducted into the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, which also includes Tim Hudson, Marquise Grissom, Terrence Mathis, Leo Mazzoni, Hawks broadcaster Bob Rathbun, and a couple other people as well, including a UGA gymnast. So good for them. Glad to see that happening for one. And congrats to them. Let's get to baseball, which, oh boy. So we beat Georgia Southern on Tuesday. Great win. Mason Patel goes 5 1/3, perfect, with 9 strikeouts, his best outing of his career by far. And then we had what should have been at least at worst a 3-1 series win over Marshall, and in fact was only a 2-2 tie. And I think everyone is aggrieved in a very similar way that it's just like, how do you not, when the pitching's been so good for most of these games, how do you still drop 2 to Marshall, who had came into the series winless? Jake, we'll start with you. My note here is splitting this is very bad. RPI tanked, which is not a thing you should be saying in weekend 2 or 3, whatever we are in the season right now.
Yeah, it's not great. I would say that it's again very unreasonable, I think, to expect to win 4-0 or 5-0 in a given week. I don't know. Sometimes maybe the answer is that yes, it is reasonable. And honestly, Georgia Tech's Massey has held up at least a little bit. They're currently sitting at 23rd
Mm-hmm.
in the Massey. So, we don't have a lot of data points yet, but I guess the numbers don't hate it that bad. But I mean, Marshall, you really got to be taking 3 out of 4 in a 4 game set. The team's
Yeah.
not very good. Their pitching seemed to have another one of those weekends where it was like all-timer type performance for a lot of them. I don't know if we
Yeah.
want that to become a theme, but you got one more get right weekend versus Western Michigan.
Yep.
Again, seasons aren't over based on one game. Also, I'm seeing now that Massey only has 3 of the 4 Marshall games in there, so I expect that number to move and not in the direction we would want it to go. So
Nope.
yeah, not great, not great, boys.
And yeah, I mean, this is a series where we scored 8 or more in 3 of the games too, and didn't
Hmm.
win 3 of those games, which is that's not going to be normal. I would say it shouldn't be normal. Keep in mind, game 3, we won 11-6 in game 3. There were 12 hit batsmen in that game, and we, I think, plunked the
Yeah,
overwhelming majority of them. I know Riley Stanford, I think, hit 5. It was just batter after
that's
batter just
ugly.
kept. There was a lot of we left lot of
Okay.
runners in scoring position in the game 2 loss. Marshall did the same thing in game 3. Uh, Actually, it feels like for a team that's supposed to be throwing a lot of strikes and first pitch strikes specifically because that's what they want to do. It's not translating all the way yet. Granted, it is early season.
I would really like to see, and this is again great podcasting because I didn't do a ton of prep on this, but I think I would like to see the like what that first pitch strike or what some of these spray charts look like. Because if they're still getting these, because again, the problem for the vast majority of the last couple of years has just been getting the ball in the zone consistently, right?
Yeah,
Um, and seeing some of these spray charts, like baseball savant style spray charts, and at least where the ball is going, even if it's getting squared up and hard hit, I think would give me a better idea of how that specifically is going, especially on those first strike kind of calls. I think another thing, and this is a funny bit, I guess, um, with all the positivity that we had last week,
Yeah.
especially after this win over Southern, I think I quipped to someone in another chat like, as is tradition, Tech will find a way to go 2-2 versus Marshall, and lo and behold, they found
yep,
a way to go 2-2
yep.
versus Marshall, and I'll say like, look, I'm not like a czar when it comes to all of um the RPI stuff, but this is
It won't
it's
help.
just not a great performance, especially went from that perspective pitching where like, I mean, like those first 2 games, you can say, okay, well, the maximum you allowed is kind of 4 runs, right? And then that's typically that's an outcome based analysis, but maybe we look a little bit deeper. We look at the hard hit rate and maybe we measure something else. But those last 2 games, I think once you start getting to 6 to 12, anywhere past 6, especially with, like you said, the type of pitching strategy that they want to be shooting for, you're talking about not just bad luck, but consistent, just lack of a consistent drop in quality, right? So I think I'm not. I think to your point and to both of your points, it's like it's the second weekend of the year. It's the second big series of the year. They played 4 games. It was very weird It was very weird one in that regard. You also have like the weather effects too. This weekend was like Friday was really weird.
It was cold. Yep.
And like and today for some reason it was like 65 degrees. I don't know. But
today was great.
Yeah, it felt
lovely.
I'm not complaining about today, but it's just it was a weird weather weekend. Again, so I don't know. I think I'm still looking for data points, and I think the thing that is a little concerning is that they've had they do dip, they're not consistent at the plate. I think these 4 games are a bit of an outlier, but if you look at all of those other competitive bracket games, right, the more evenly matched games, especially against like a Southern, which yes, traditionally I think we see Sunbelt and Southern a little bit lower tier, but that's a very good baseball program down there.
Yeah.
And they play.
I mean,
typically
they hosted a regional more
tight.
recently than us. So like,
well, yeah, that's the bend that I'm coming. It's like the Duke football thing, right? That we used to talk about all the time. It's like old timers are like, we need to be beating Duke every single year at a walk. Now Duke and Tech are well, I guess this was 2 or 3 years ago, but Duke and Tech are effectively the same competitive level. It's like that's the point I'm trying to make. In those kinds of games, the hitting has not been up to the nuclear standard that I think. Nuclear standard is a weird thing to say, but you kind of get what I'm saying. The high powered standard that I think we want to keep, or that we want to have seen continue from last year. And it's just really, it comes down to consistency on both ends of the field, right?
Right now, the hitting side, Kit Schmidt's leading with a 400 average.
What's the team average?
The team average right now is 284. Our opponents are at 230. Highest on base is Kyle Lodis at 564. Kit Schmidt's at 514. Drew Burris slugging 710 with 3 homers and 13 RBIs and the most total bases of anyone on the team. So no shocker there whatsoever. On the pitching front, so we all, I think, were remarking how the first Brady Jones start did not go that well. Brady Jones' second start went a lot better, where he pitched 5 innings of 1 earned run ball after not getting an out against Old Dominion. So the bounce back there was very good to see. And Tate McKee was good again in Game 1 against Marshall. So when we've seen McKee and Patel go, it's been really good. The second outing from Brady Jones was promising. So hopefully that was just a early beginning of the season nerves got in the way of that first one. Who was it? Jalen Payton got his return appearance at Georgia Southern after that's where he came from, and finished and cleaned up that game for us, which is nice.
I think one of the things you mentioned there with Patel and McKee, I think one of the things that we've talked about consistently, even in years where Tech has had past years, Tech has had one guy that's been incredibly consistent on the mound, right? Some of these years that they've made it back to a regional. The thing about that 2019 team that we keep coming back to is that throughout the season they had 3 guys that they could rely on.
Yep.
And then by the end of it, obviously 2 got injured, right?
Yep.
So that's what ended up costing the regional. But I think if McKee and Patel can keep stringing together these 5-6 inning starts and continue stringing together performances like these, I think that bodes very well. And then it just has to come down to who steps up in that third slot, right?
Yeah.
If you're prognosticating towards a May, a June, right? I think the other thing too with this week, and maybe this is a pitcher sequencing thing, right? And especially that second weekend back, you're trying to get back in the groove of the grind of the schedule, and you're playing not 4 games, you're playing 5 games.
Yeah.
So maybe you're starting your 1 versus Southern, then you're starting your one versus Southern, you're starting your two versus then the first game versus Marshall, and then you sort of see that the performances dip from that point,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
We got this, and we got to see Caden Spivey start today in Game 4 in the weird Game 4. So he got an extra. He got an outing there. He pitched 3 innings of 2 earned run ball.
Yeah, so you're really in that 4-game stretch. Like, I mean, you're working through 3. You know what your pitcher sequencing is going to be. With that 4, then you have to stretch an extra game during the weekend. You just tax your bullpen an extra game or whatever. So
Yep.
Yep.
And
fatigue,
Yep.
early season, like match fitness, all of that stuff is going to come into play.
And we threw 7 guys in today's game. So there you go.
Yeah.
No,
7.
and I think that's part of the upshot, right? Like the weirdness and the variance and many people in there.
Mhm.
Like, not that we left this team for dead last year early in the year, but like I don't think at least Akshay, not to put you on blast here, but I don't think you either gave them a ton of grace for some early season weirdness. Like we talked about with Ben and like we talked about just as FTRS guys in general, there's a lot of like new here that needs to gel. A lot of new pitchers to
good point.
manage. There's a lot
Yeah.
of hitting to get around and to, you know, yeah, you got an early midweek down to Statesboro, but just then another on top of that odd just odd week in general. I don't know how much of this I want to write off, but I also don't know how much stock I want to put in any of it. It's not
Is
the
this where
worst loss
I
in
feel
the
like this is
world,
another
but
time
I
where
don't know.
we've like gone very black and white with our initial cut, and then we've just
Yep.
talked ourselves into nuance, which I feel like happens
Yeah.
Hey, that's
at a
That's about
concerning
improvement,
amount.
Akshay.
people are hearing us learn as
Yeah.
we're talking. We're talking our way into a better, healthier place than we started. This is
Yes.
good. This is good. Hopefully
No.
people enjoy it.
I have therapy on Tuesday, Jack, not
okay,
Monday night.
Sorry. We'll reschedule. Anyways, this coming week, we got hosting West Georgia on Wednesday, and then the weekend we play Western Michigan. Jake, West Georgia's new to D1, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a new in-state game, correct?
Yeah, it's not one I've seen on the schedule before. Maybe it's back in like the 70s or 80s, but even then, I mean, I don't know how long West Georgia has fielded athletics teams, period.
Right.
My
We've seen them in
understanding is
hoops,
like they're
though.
like a D2 football powerhouse, right?
Historically,
that.
I believe they're pretty good at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Be interesting.
It's
they do a lot of
and
online advertising. That's what I know.
yes.
You can
Yes.
find them on your local MARTA bus, I think.
Alongside SMU, you know?
Yes.
Every
schools
day
of
I'm biking to
equal
work
quality.
every day I'm biking to work and I see we're ready to run and I'm like, congrats SMU. Thank
You've made
you.
it.
Thank you for your money. Support my transit
You've
system.
made it to Atlanta. Hey, someone's got to pay for those buses. I am scrolling through the record books right now just to see if I can find us before we switch over to softball. But I'm not.
Sidebar, speaking of paying for things, Marta had a pop-up shop at the Dome station before the game. Pretty good wares.
Yeah, I had friends
kind
buy
of
from that.
neat.
Okay, we
Well-
have played West Georgia. This will be game number 21 against West Georgia. I will give y'all one guess each as to when the last time we played West Georgia was.
1977.
Okay.
I was going to say 78 and say that we joined the ACC in 79, 80. So,
We did play them in both of those years.
okay.
We then also played them in 79, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, and then 88. We currently have an active 3-game winning streak dating back to April of 1985. We are 11-9 overall against them.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, the more you know.
There you go. Yes, so West Georgia on Wednesday, Western Michigan over the weekend. Lots of West going on. Over to softball, which had an interesting week, so to say. Handled Troy as they should, 8-0 on the road. And then we had the I-75 tournament, which featured the University of Kentucky, Coastal Carolina, and Dayton. We lost both times to Kentucky pretty badly. They lost to Coastal Carolina not so greatly, and then close, and then barely beat Dayton, and then destroyed Dayton. This is that weird stuff going on. We're 10-7 after 3 weeks. Sophia Voiles is pitching very well. Kinsey Norton pitching very well. Jake, I'll leave it. I know Jake, you went to a game, correct? So you saw some stuff,
No,
or did you not get
I
get out
was
to one?
I was unable to make it there in person
Okay.
because I unfortunately or fortunately went to the Atlanta United game with our third co-host here, so I
Ah,
did not get to make it
woo!
to the doubleheader on Saturday. But that said, I did get to listen in on a decent chunk of these. I'm gonna set my concern meter somewhat high.
Uh-oh.
I think that Dayton was a good bounce back. Dayton,
Yep.
both games kind of profile pretty similarly to the Bradley double up last week. A absolute throttling of a team you need to beat, and then a game that's like suspiciously close, and thank goodness we won it.
Right. Right.
um, but I would say that I am definitely in a my eyebrows are raised. I would have liked to get one against Coastal. I will say. Both Coastal and Kentucky are quite good. I'm not just saying that because I'm used to watching Kentucky beat the brakes off of Louisville. They are a good team. They're
Yeah.
an SEC power, a tournament regular, all that good stuff. They got two really good teams in the building, and this is probably Tech's hardest rolling 4 game stretch of maybe the year.
Sure.
Dare I
Yeah.
say? I don't think it's so bold. Maybe, Florida State and Georgia late in April, and then into Clemson. Like that's pretty brutal, but certainly the hardest slate, 4 in a row Tech, I think we'll get until then. Um, I think both of those teams pencil out as better than Georgia Tech, but if you want to go to the postseason, you need to flip a couple of these, especially against a 40s, 50s-ish type coastal team, or maybe a
Yeah.
fringy top 25 team like Kentucky.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just they looked pretty uncompetitive in 3 of the games and lost the fourth. So I
And
think that is a little concerning. So
yeah, it's the matter of you got to get over these kind of games to make the progress we're wanting to see from them, just as a program overall. And
yes,
to get back to like, okay, we know they can at least hold their own in a tournament game kind of thing, or just get to it. Still got to get to the tournament again as a
yeah,
program, and get out of just the right behind tier of teams. I do want to note in that 15-0 win over Dayton, where we won that in 5 inning mercy rule. 13 runs were scored in the third inning by Tech. Sydney Watts was one hitter away from a perfect game. Though it wouldn't have counted because it was only 5 innings, but she faced 16 batters. The minimum would have been 15. So at least that's good. Good to see. We thought Sydney was going to be good, and so good to see a really really good game from her in that sense, especially after
yeah.
we had played them
That
so
that's
close. So
really
that's huge.
really going to be helpful if that can keep plugging along,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the Kentucky game's just like, ugh, come on. We just can't be allowing 16 runs and expecting to beat the team that's going to be great. I'll note Sophia Voyle, she's at a 1.71 ERA in her 8 appearances. Hitters are both hitting under 200 against her and Kinsey Norton, which is fantastic. Um, Norton has 17 runs allowed, but only 8 of them are earned. So defense isn't helping her at all. So there's just variance there to still be had. Voiles is at a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. Awesome. Madison Caulfield is coming in relief the most so far. Norton's also finishing games as well. So they're both the main relief options, but between the three of them, they've got the most innings so far. The downside is we have the 14th team. Out of 15 teams, we are 14th in team ERA in the ACC right now. So,
Yeah.
granted, this weekend definitely did not help in that regard. On the hitting side, Weiler is hitting 476, which is awesome. Jaden Gailey's hitting 444. Both have over a 500 on base percentage. We will take that all
I
day,
will
every day.
say Weiler hasn't had nearly as many plate appearances or at bats though. So
That's true.
I think maybe that's an argument to get her more, not a detriment to what she's pulled off so far, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paige Vukadinovic, Ileana Gottlieb, Grace Connolly, and Grayson Tucker are all hitting over 300. Fielding wise, we're kind of fine. Tucker, I did see, was at 6 errors. That sticks out at least for right now, but long way to go here still. That's not a glaring error, just something that stuck out on the charts.
That's a law of small numbers thing, I think, as much as anything. Like, there's nothing
Yeah.
that majorly concerns me. It's just not like, and granted, we talked about baseball. We gave them hey, there's a ton of turnover here. There's a lot of
Yeah.
turnover on this softball team, too.
That's true. Yeah,
There's a
there's a
lot
lot.
of
Yeah.
softball left to be played. I don't know. I don't want to write either team off, but I don't want to give them passes because there's things that are like, hey, this is something to take a look at. And then there's
Right.
also things that are,
It's
that you'd like
both
to maybe break a different way.
it's both there's a lot of newness here. There's a lot to gel into. There's a lot to learn in these early season games. So absolutely not trying. In no way are we trying to like just decline anyone or anything like that on this team. Like they have.
There's
There's a long way
there's
to
too
go
many
here.
games for it to be done 3 weeks in.
Exactly, it's a long way to go. A lot of things to learn. But at the same time, it's
I'll
like
add.
they're also
Well,
Georgia Tech athletes. Like we know, like okay, there is some level of expectation that inherently comes from playing for us.
I'll add
Yeah.
too that the in one case, like the difference between this team and the baseball team is that baseball, if I remember correctly, there are a lot more experience transfers. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're betting
Yeah.
in people. You're betting in new people, yes, but generally those athletes have experience playing in a traditional college baseball setup, right? That they understand the schedule, they understand the grind, etc. They understand to an extent how to balance the educational workload and the demands of the schedule. Whereas on the softball side, if I remember correctly, and check me if I'm wrong on this, Jack, a lot of that starting nine is actually second semester freshmen, and so
Yep.
you're betting in and maybe not just second semester freshmen, but also players that are brand new to the starting lineup,
That's a
right?
big. I think that's more accurate. Is that just a lot of new starting lineup people
Yeah,
versus freshmen? Yeah.
and maybe like there's an extra similar with baseball, and maybe I didn't touch on this either. I don't want this to come across as uneven, but like there is still a betting in process when you're going to be penned in as a starter at a specific position every single week, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit to me just off the cuff. And to be fair, I haven't watched a ton of this team just by happenstance, but I think there's a little bit higher of an adjustment, like a barrier of adjustment
Right.
for
No,
that
I think.
softball team,
Yeah.
and also that this early season slate has been tougher,
Right.
right?
The only
So
players on here that like were consistently starting for Georgia Tech, so I'm not counting. This is also excluding the transfers into Tech. Are Reese Hunter, Ella Edgman, and Paige Vukadinovich. Those are the three players that were starting reliably or playing a lot of innings for us last year. That are still playing a lot of innings this year for us. Connolly came off the bench. Grayson Tucker came off the bench, and Gailey came off the bench, but it wasn't as frequently as the rate of which they're playing right now, in the fielding positions at least. Boyles and Norton maintaining. Evan Mangini is pretty much just pitching. She's only hit 8 times this year, so that's been mostly a transfer into the circle versus out in the field. So that's interesting to note.
I kind of dig it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
sure.
I
Yeah,
I don't
well,
dislike it.
why not? Why not? Yeah,
Why not?
yeah.
Yep.
So it's got that going for her. This week they play Kennesaw State at home tomorrow or tonight, depending on when you're listening. February 25th, and then
Which we didn't get them last week because of a postponement, so
that's
or maybe it
right.
was 2 weeks ago. So we don't have a data point there, but
No,
this is one you need to get back on
yeah,
track, take the dub. Yeah.
would be really nice to get it considering the old Stanford Cardinals shows up this weekend.
Yeah.
That's fun. 20th in the country at the moment in the early rankings. So I'm bummed that I will be in North Carolina this weekend. Maybe I'll try to make it to the Sunday game. But
on a previous episode, did I mention their stadium situation? By the way, I
oh,
feel
that
like
they're oh yes, that they're
I
playing in their
put it in
baseball,
our
in their
chat.
football. Yeah, they're playing in their football stadium.
Yeah, so they've completely torn down their old facility. I mean, to be clear, this series, as much as it says in my notes here, is at Tech. So
It is.
this is not a problem for this specific series. But Stanford has torn down their old softball facility to build a brand new one that'll open in 2026 or in time for the 2026 season.
Right.
Right now, they have actually put a softball diamond in a corner of an end zone in Stanford Stadium, and it's actually
It's not bad.
I like came up on this 2 weekends ago while I was just like surfing through like channel surfing on ESPN Plus and watched Stanford versus Seattle University. I was like, why the heck are they playing at Stanford Stadium? And yeah, this is the solution that they came up with. And I was kind of shocked that they had the space to do it because usually the corners are pretty tight, but
It's
apparently it
doable. It's a
works.
much more doable
Well,
for softball than
yeah,
baseball.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's something that like you see in some early season tournaments. Like I think the Fargo Dome hosts either
no, the
baseball or
one that I'm
softball.
thinking of,
U.S. Bank definitely hosts
yeah,
a
that's the
baseball
one that I'm
tournament
thinking of
Yeah.
because
because that one
Minnesota
looks
baseball
weird.
used to like play at the Metrodome for the first half of their season back when that was a
That makes sense.
whole
Yeah, yeah,
shebang.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Interesting,
think
interesting.
it's still not like a tournament. Like I think Minnesota proper plays there until the Northeast defrosts because they have that opportunity. But I'm saying this off the cuff
Yeah, that'd be. I
and
mean, I would
don't know
do
for
it.
sure.
That makes sense. If anyone's,
Also, to make
go ahead.
a soccer joke, since we have already mentioned soccer once, it's weird to see once again a baseball diamond or a football stadium converted into a baseball diamond instead of a baseball diamond converted into a soccer field. So that's what I am used to personally.
Good point.
And that
Good
is a
point.
very niche joke for like 4 people that listen to this.
If baseball and football stadiums is a weird rabbit hole you would like to go down after this podcast, look up Red Sox versus Dodgers in the LA Coliseum. It
Oh,
is
that's
some wild
disgusting.
stuff. It is some
That's
wild stuff.
disgusting.
That's all. I'll leave it at that. Uh, I think with that, I think we're ready to take a short little break here and hear from our friends at Section 103.
Yeah, as always, this podcast is brought to you by Section 103. It's the spring. It's something that you may be in the mind of spring cleaning. Instead of spring cleaning, might I suggest using our code FTRS for 10% off to get more stuff from Section 103. Of course, hats, baseballs here, softballs here. It's a perfect time to get yourself a baseball cap from Section 103 or one of the vaguely baseball or softball related items that you can get as well. Of course, the best place to do that is at section103.com, but you can also find them and their antics over on Twitter. As always, free shipping on orders over $70. Go give them a look over there. And yeah, don't forget to haven't mentioned this in a while, but to vote on some of the new designs there to section103.com.
On to basketball. We'll start with the women for now. They played number 13 North Carolina State at home and Florida State at home. Both resulted in not fun losses. North Carolina State was a much more blowout game. We lost 83-68. It was not out of hand. And then in the end of the third quarter into the fourth quarter, North Carolina State went on a 17-0 run, and that pretty much solved that game very easily for the Wolfpack. Which just sucked to see, but that is what happened. Just yeah, Tony Morgan did score 17 in that game. Caleb Blackshear had a great rebounding game. Danny Carnegie hit 4 threes in the game, so like there was a lot of positive performances coming out of that game. We shot 40%. We just allowed 53% of NC State shots, and you can't really win basketball games if you're going to let a team score 53% or shoot 53% a game. But like we outstole them, we out assisted them, we out offensive rebounded them, which is huge. Just could not pull it all together at the end. Not too much on that. That really needs to be noted. Just besides that, we could not defend them well enough, which is becoming a little bit of a worrying trend against these good ACC teams that the defense is not holding up. Then we played Florida State on Sunday, lost 73-70. They were without 2 of their best players, and they still had a player in Bowles who put up 32 points on us, and we came back. We did come back. We were down 12 at one point in the fourth quarter. Came back to tie it in the final minute and could not pull it off in the end. I mentioned the third quarter nap here because Nell Fortner outright, without prompting, noted in their press conference afterwards that the third quarter is what's killing this team right now, and they just cannot get out of their own way in those quarters. We are outscoring teams in the fourth quarter, 570 to 512, but that is by far the smallest margin across all quarters this season in regulation, and a lot of that tightness would have come in ACC play as well. So I feel like the main thing for us to talk about here is we're no longer ranked. We have dropped out of the rankings for the first time in a long time this season, which sucks, but we were expecting this. In all honesty, they're 26, so they're right there. They're right there. They're right outside in the votes. But this is even against teams that are about as good as us who are down players, we didn't have it, which is not good.
The thing I want to start with here is that this team is, by my count, 4-3 in the month of February, and a lot of those wins came at the beginning of the year or beginning of the month. So you're talking about Miami, a weird one versus SMU, Boston College.
Yep.
So a lot of these losses have been backloaded. Number 2, we talked about this stretch of 4 games heading into the tournament, the NC State, Florida State, Cal, and Stanford, even as early as our preview episode.
Yep.
right? Like we've been looking at this the whole way through saying, hey, this is where the rubber meets the road, not just from an end of the season perspective, but also here are the type of teams that you need to beat to make noise in March
Mm-hmm.
kind of scenario, right? And now they are 0-2 versus that set of teams with Cal, who's an equivalent quality team and has been ranked before the season, ahead and at the end of a 6-hour flight to the Bay Area, and then Stanford on the back end of that to end the regular season, right? So those are a couple of notes, I guess, on the road ahead. The third quarter nap thing is the last thing I want to touch on, and to me, whenever we talk about that as being a major contributing factor towards losses, and I guess towards wins too, it's just I think I'd need to do a little bit more data analysis on it instead of just talking about this anecdotally. But like the thing that I think about logically is just a lack of adjustment, like counter adjustment coming off of halftime.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this. We talked about this at one point with regards to volleyball, where there was one, I think it was that Notre Dame game, probably like 2019. Jake, I feel like you remember this because it was a reverse sweep, like a 3-2
The Notre
reverse
Dame
sweep.
reverse sweep was not 2019. We reverse swept them, I believe, in 2019 because that game was packed and loud, and that was we're gonna go to the tournament, but then we didn't make it. So I think it was 21
Okay,
that the
so
game you're
I'm
thinking of was.
either thinking of the 21 Notre Dame game or a Louisville game. It was either a Louisville or a Pitt game in which Tech was up to. No, it was the Pitt game at home in which Tech was up 2 sets. Either this year or last year. I think it was last year. And they just couldn't close. They just gave away up. The Pitt made one adjustment and gave up the rest of and were able to pull away. I think these are similarly bucketed in my mind because it kind of showcases in a critical moment in a close game. There's that lack of adjustment and counter adjustment, right? It takes until the fourth quarter. Again, obviously, some of these are break driven, right? You get a full quarter break or a halftime break, you have more time to adjust. But there's just that lack of adjustment, like in quarter, in game adjustment that permeates these kinds of situations, especially when you are out of nowhere shooting like 20% in a quarter. Right.
Yeah. The shooting didn't match up. I'm looking at Bart Torvik stuff now. These last 2 losses were still highly rated for us. 87 against Florida State, 94 against 87 against NC State, 94 against Florida State. And that backs up what I saw at the eye test too. Is like I saw a team that had good things going for them. Tiana Thompson, I have to mention in this Florida State game, she led the team with 19 points. Was just fantastic. Eventually, they'll put out the smallest lineup she's put up all year, which had, if I remember correctly, it had Rusna Agostanaite, Zoe Smith, Tiana Thompson, Chit Chat Wright, and I want to say maybe Kara Dunn. Either way, there was no, I think it was Kayla Blackshear, but there was no main center position kind of player going on out there. Like it was just quickness and speed the whole way. Tony Morgan did have a fall during the game, and that took her out for a little bit. Seemed like she just hit her tailbone kind of hard after going for a layup. But Tiana just balled out and was an answer that kept us in this game in a lot of moments, including getting the first game tying bucket we had at the end of the fourth quarter. So we had 10 players play, which, as much as we want to see our main 5 just nail this at the end of the year, it's taking everybody, which has its upsides, has its downsides. But ultimately, yeah, you can't shoot 33% in a quarter where your opponent shoots 73%. Like that's just
I mean, you just need to adjust to that. I mean, yes, sometimes teams get hot, and Jack, you may know this. You watched this game, so you may know this a little bit more than I did. But just like you need to adjust quicker on those kinds of runs. I think the thing that you guys remind me of all the time is basketball is a game of runs, and sometimes you just get hot, right? When you notice that, it's like, okay, where can we increase the pressure? How can we be a little bit more? How can we limit that person getting the ball, even if they're hot hand fallacy, right?
And the growth here is that after Florida State went up 13, Tech immediately, like as soon as I got to 13, immediately it was an 11-0 run. by Tech, and they got it to a one-score game, got it to a tie game, just could not get that extra bucket they needed in the fourth quarter to put the game away, and had a pretty bad. Danny had a couple travel calls where she just slid her pivot foot twice, and one of them was in the final minute. That was really costly right there. And we led for most of this game, just only by only a minute and 2 seconds more than Florida State. So this is a very coin flippy kind of game here, and which makes sense. This team was just about as good as us, even missing two players. They're just also tall. A thing that we continue to struggle against is just tallness. They also didn't really have anything else to do but throw out tallness against us, considering who they were missing. That it worked very well for them. So that not fun, but that's what we got there. As we mentioned, they play Cal on Thursday. On Sunday, they play at Stanford to wrap up the season. I am hoping I will have the energy to stay up until 10 o'clock and watch this game on Thursday. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. We will see. On to the men.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
Jack, I want to intersperse here. Have we talked ACC standings? I think that's worth a.
Oh, I forgot to
a
mention
quick
that.
aside.
Yeah, so they're pretty much locked into only a single bye in the ACC tournament in that 7th, 8th range. They mathematically had a chance to get fourth a couple weeks before these weekends games if they won out and the right teams lost out, but that ain't happening now. So
The Florida State was a big swing on that.
Yep.
NC State also, I don't think they would have knocked NC State out, but
No.
yeah, Florida State, UNC, NC State, and Notre Dame are your top four at the moment. So not a lot of way to crack that, especially
No.
having dropped three of those teams. So
not cracking that right now. And Torvik, we're still 27th, I want to say. Yeah, 27th in Torvik. So we're still comfortably in a make the tournament kind of situation. We still have a better record than Florida State, actually, just not in conference play. So it will take, if they have a remarkably good ACC tournament run, that may start raising some eyebrows in terms of, okay, how highly should they be ranked kind of thing. Probably wouldn't butt us into the top 16 by any stretch of the imagination, unless, I guess, you could beat two top 10 teams in the ACC tournament to get there, too. So there's ways to get it done. There's another massively great opportunity for them to gel and have a late season run kind of thing kind of happen here. So even if we lose these next two games, I think just they're showing signs of figuring some things out through this growing pain with, again, freshmen that are important to this team. So I am not losing any kind of hope in terms of having at least a successful end to the season quite yet.
Yep.
One more thing here. All seven, if I'm reading the standings correctly, all seven of their losses have been the ACC teams.
That is correct.
They're 9-7 versus the conference, and then 21-7 overall. Obviously, I think we've talked about that non-conference schedule being at points. There were some good teams in there, though. Like
there were two
we
ranked
talked about
wins.
Oregon. We talked about South Dakota State. But
though that 15
UNC,
run, that 15-0 run included Oregon, Mississippi State,
specifically non-conference.
Mississippi State.
Sorry, my brain went over.
Yeah, it was Oregon, Mississippi State, South Dakota State,
right?
and
Mississippi State, I forgot about.
And
Nebraska was a good shot.
Yeah, so those were all pretty big, and we were losing in that Mississippi State game for a lot of it. So that was huge. That a lot of the streak kind of hinged on that game.
Just in terms of the standings too, for the last two games, Cal is just above us at 10-6 in the conference. Stanford is down at 6-10, a bit lower, 9 games back to the top. So as much as everyone likes to remind me that Stanford is taking a down year, it does have to feel that far down the ACC pyramid there.
Currently, Torvik has it as a coin flip game against California and about 6-point favorite for us against Stanford.
That sounds about right, but it is a long road trip.
It's a long way
out the West Coast.
Yeah, we did ask about this at the press conference, and Nell mentioned they kind of didn't talk. They haven't really talked about it. Danny Hardigay was just like, it's a business trip. So I hope they have some plan in place for how to deal with the travel slog and whatnot. The stats have not been good for teams making the trip over and playing on the road in different time zones this year in the ACC play across sports. So we'll see. On to the men, who I don't know how much we want to talk about this. I didn't watch any of this, and it seems like it was a good thing for me to not watch this. Lost 69-54 to Boston College, which feels like it's a house of horrors for us now. What's the deal here?
I think that's a Joey Weaver quote, and
Yes.
if it's not, I hear it in his voice because, and this is a free plug for Basketball Conference podcast, the ACC football podcast. I can hear him describing Boston College. I think even Boston College, Chestnut Hill is a house of horrors. But this game was not super pretty. There was a lot of sports this weekend. I was real near after today's loss to Marshall to calling this an not an all-timer of a bad Georgia Tech sports weekend, but it wasn't super great. Didn't feel the warm fuzzies about either basketball program this
No.
weekend. It's definitely part of what influenced my softball mentality going into that discussion earlier. And yeah, so I apologize to softball, but baseball and men's basketball and women's basketball, they kind of had me a little down. I'm not gonna lie to you, but
Yep.
this is by far and away one of the will not make the ACC tournament in the first year that is possible type of teams. Boston
They still
College has
can.
looked.
They still can. They're only a game back of that final seed right now after that win. So that
They're
helped them
talking about
immensely.
Boston College
Ugh,
specifically, to clarify. They're talking about
yeah.
Boston College.
Yeah.
Uh, I I don't know. I think this is I kept getting to the point where, okay, Georgia Tech men's basketball, they've got momentum, they've got some good wins here.
Yep.
Let's see what they can do. Maybe you
Buddy, I
finish
wanted to
the
watch
year
a
on a
couple
little
of
bit
these
of a run.
games. I
Yeah.
want that's
Yeah.
when you know that it's that they had some momentum.
That's when you
I
sell
was
your stock is when Akshay's tuned in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the
Oh
shoe. It's
man.
like the old Kennedy quote about the shoe shiner. If the shoe shiner is giving you stock picks, that's when you know it's time to sell. It's the exact
Oh
same
man.
mentality. It's
Oh
when I
god.
start getting. It's when I start getting intrinsically motivated to turn on Georgia Tech men's basketball games after being incredibly cynical about them over a period, and then
Oh
that's
man.
exactly when they
And,
start
and,
to hit the
and that's the
schneid.
thing. I want to be positive about this team. There are things that you can squint and like. There's things you don't even have to squint and like. And I don't know. It's just a game you gotta win, and
Yep.
they didn't pick it up. And I don't know if I'm at a spot where, or was at a spot where I was like, oh, maybe an IT, but like, there just hasn't been any momentum. I think is how I would describe the the whole process.
To
Yep.
your point,
If
though,
that's
like
fair. So
that game versus, I mean, Boston College again is the second to last team in the ACC standings currently. Um,
mhm.
this if Tech had won that game, they would be in I think an even 500
Yep.
if
That's
my
right. That's
math
right.
is
Yep.
correct in the
Uh,
ACC with
in
a
the ACC, they'd be a game above overall for those keeping track at home.
Uh yeah,
no, they
yeah.
would be
No,
yes, they
that's right.
would be
That's
a
right. That's
game
right.
above.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
because it
would.
would just be
Yep.
14-13. They would have, let's see, they have 4 games left. Pitt is next. Maybe you pencil it in as in but there's a worse NC State team, at least by record. But even Steven probably on the balance of the the competitive balance, a terrible Miami team, and then a very good Wake Forest team left on the docket. You
In their building too. Wake Forest in their
Yeah.
building.
yeah. So let's
Yeah.
say you pencil in Pitt and Wake Forest as automatic losses. That Boston College game was probably a necessary win if you wanted to go over 500 in the ACC this year for the first time in a long time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
At this point, you win. You beat NC State, you beat Miami, you go 2-2 the rest of the way. That would put Tech at 9-11. So maybe I mean, maybe there's some magic up like on an away game up in Pitt. Maybe Wake Forest lays an egg. Who's to
Well,
say, right?
the
But
bi- the big yeah, and the thing here is we're not out of the eighth seed in the ACC tournament as well, which gets us out of playing in day one. Or yeah, it gets us out of or no, or the nine seed. Like we get, I mean, there's four teams at 7 and 9 right now that gets you, I believe, from 8 to 10 in the conference. We play NC State and Miami, who are the bottom two teams, the two of the bottom teams in the conference. Miami's just outright just not going to make it at this point. So yeah, not getting that Boston College game can very well be the difference between us playing Tuesday or Wednesday to start the tournament.
And Akshay, I do want to issue an errata. The
oh,
2021 men's basketball team went 11-6 in ACC competition on way to a
oh,
conference title. So
oh, you
Yeah,
know what I meant. technicality.
That's my favorite Georgia Tech team maybe of all time.
If-
And it's a shame
if
they played in an
Fanatics-
empty building.
I don't
so.
think we can discount Moses Wright and Jose Alvarado, my
I
friend.
won't discount
Okay,
them.
okay,
However,
okay. There was a highlight from that season that made its way into my feed for some reason this past week. It was against Syracuse. They had all the seats taken out on the far side, and all the players were sitting like 6 feet apart. I
Yeah.
was like, wow, what a throwback! And
I
it was
know.
the sneaky sneak. Jose like comes up behind him, and then
Oh man.
like the pass up to maybe DeVoe or Wright, pass up to Usher, Jordan Usher, and he just one
Mhm.
hand flushes it. Oh my gosh! I was like. I missed that. I missed
That was
that.
so
Go
good.
Jackets.
Oh man,
But
I think I was at that game against Syracuse. Actually, I remember that one of those
I was
Moses Wright.
there.
Of course you were. I remember
Mhm.
one of those Moses Wright dunks. I went to with a friend who like wasn't as basketball informed, and like I was having to explain why we were losing our minds when Moses Wright was nearly breaking the glass on his dunks. Yeah, no. Oh man, I missed those kind of
Yeah.
days. But yes, Tech is 7-9 in the ACC right now, 13-14 overall. We are the highest. We are furthest up in the ACC standings of teams with losing records, for what that's worth.
It
But
really feels emblematic. We be feeling like the best of the rest right now, if that makes sense.
no, I think it's a great way to put it. I think it's a great way to put it. About halfway ish in the conference, and that's where it starts. That's where the sentiment starts to
You know
collapse.
the weird thing, though?
Unamazing non-conference followed by yeah, we're actually 7-9 in the ACC.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that.
what I was gonna say. Like, if you asked me where I thought this team was going to be at the beginning of the year, after just like an extremely stinky start to the year, it probably would have been, man, they might struggle to make that first day of the tournament.
Yep, that's a good point.
That first day of first day of the ACC tournament, not even the NCAA tournament.
Right.
The first day of the ACC tournament.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get any buys through this tournament to land us in the ACC championship game.
Yeah, but
the only buy we're getting is the one we bring with us. You know,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
but
right.
but it has been, if I'm being extremely positive, generous, I think is the best way I want to put this. I think it has been an unlikely a season of unlikely heroes and a season of just generally unlikely. I did not expect them to be
Yeah, I
in
think
with
it's
a
fair.
shout in like the middle part of the ACC standings at this point. And there
Yeah.
are 4 games left for them to go to really own me and go 500 both in conference and overall. So
would be
perfectly
something.
balanced as all things should be.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
see,
So
that's all I want. Like, but seriously, like I've been saying for years, like the thing that I want out of, I guess I haven't been saying this for years, but I've thought this for years. The thing that I want out of Georgia Tech basketball is just not to be embarrassing. And I think like a season in which they play like crap for like the vast majority of it, but I'm just being honest. They've been terrible for vast stretches of it, but they go 500 in conference play, which they don't do even in good years, and also go 500 overall and make the NIT. Like that is for a guy that we might have we've been like we're raking over the coals at one point, like colloquially. Damon Stoudemire would have a pretty banging year too if he did
here's
that.
one important thing that we need to say. This is not your undergrad ACC, let alone your dad's
That's true.
ACC.
Yes, yes.
This is not a conference putting 10 teams in the tournament and oh gosh, we're lucky
They
to go
also, let's be
8
clear,
and
the
10
ACC
back when
is
there were
terrible.
only 18
Yeah.
games. You know, like that it's a completely different world out there. I think than comparing it to 500 in the ACC. I'm not going to say it feels like the standard because this team did get off to a sneaky start, so 500 feels like somewhat positive. But man, no, this is not Josh Pastner clawing to get a 9th win on an 18-team conference schedule. This is a completely different.
Before
I had a visceral reaction to that.
To wrap this up, there are 18 teams playing men's basketball in the Atlantic Coast Conference right now. Only 7 of them have winning records in conference play. So there's your point. The team
also, there's a massive article. Sorry, last note on this. There was a massive article, I think like a week and a half ago, about how the SEC is now basketball's dominant power. And even as someone that doesn't do like conference affiliation, like I don't know, like bolstering whatever it is, like bandwagoning, it did also send a shiver up my spine. It was gross.
We should defund the SEC. Anyways, NC State, Miami, and Pitt NC State, Miami, Wake Forest to finish the year. The NC State and Miami games are at home. That is this Saturday, and then the following Tuesday. I would highly recommend y'all show up to these games before season is up. I'm going to quickly breeze us through tennis because I know we got a lot to get on with swimming. Men's tennis, 7-0 sweep over the Citadel, exactly what you'd want. And then 4-2 win over UNC Wilmington, who Jake has listed here as 60th in Massey, so not all that bad. Gabriele Brancatelli was unfinished by the time it was over. Loss on court 1 and court 5. They got Notre Dame and Louisville coming up next to we should beat, correct?
Yeah. These are matches you want to win. Get yourself a decent seed for the ACC. Stacks some wins. The top of the conference is too good not to take care of business in your own building against Notre Dame, but also definitely Louisville. You got to win these. So.
Yeah, agreed. Our ranked women's tennis team, they beat Virginia Tech 4-1, which is great. Kelly Bilchev and Scarlett Nicholson lost. We lost doubles. Oh, how about that? Okay, that's not
Yeah.
fantastic, but that's let's see, close. We were close on courts 2 and 3, which is good. Kate Sherbera and Tally Licht won 7-5 in theirs. Who was it? Cruz and Roach lost 7-5, and there. That would have been fun to watch. That I mean, I wish I could have seen that in some form or fashion, but that's fine. By the way, got it done in the singles. Lost 4-2 to Virginia after that, which makes sense. They're the number 2 team in the country, and we don't usually beat the number 2 team in the country in tennis on most days. Given Roach and Tally Licht did win their singles matches pretty convincingly at that, so that's good to see. They have Clemson on Saturday on the road, who we should also beat, correct?
Yeah, Clemson's better than they've been. I was surprised to see this pregame win percentage as high as it is. It's at about 76%. I believe Clemson's a top 30 team from having clicked around there. So not sure how that math works, but hold serve, but and we'll see how it goes.
That sounds right. All right, I'm just gonna hand you the reins for swimming here, and you tell us what happened here in Greensboro.
So this is my Roman Empire, this swim meet. Out of all of the things that happen in a given year, I think about this almost not constantly. I don't really think about it 11 months of the year, but when it does come around, I like to think that we do a pretty good job of breaking it down here on the podcast, and we've got some new analysis this year for us to kind of flesh out our understanding. Swimming's a top-heavy sport. Even though Georgia Tech men's swimming is a top 20-ish team, they really stand no shot of winning an NCAA title. And quite frankly, as the assessed ninth best team in the conference, not much of a shot there either, just based on how the math all maths in this sport. It's very hard to score some updates and have things bounce a certain way. That being said, we want to make sure that we are diving in on this meet because it is the biggest one that we are going to see. So all that being said, your overall results, Cal wins their first ACC title. They win the men's swimming side of the ledger. UVA won their approximately 1 millionth title. Tech finished 9th on the men's side and 13th on the women's side. Tech finishes kind of in the middle of a cluster of a number of teams, but above where they could have been. It's kind of like the bottom 4 and then a really big gap, and then the next 6-ish teams, and then above that is another 6. So Tech kind of in the decidedly middle tier of the conference, down about 1 spot from where their expected performance might have them prior to the meet. It's really on the women's side that I would kind of flag 13th as being particularly low. They were as low as 14th and even 15th about halfway through the meet. This is something that if you kind of just do some tallying of the score sheet based on seed time, which is not an exact science, which is why I kind of have a little bit of a simulation to it too, to get us a little bit more of that expected results there. You would have expected the women to pencil in right around 9th, so that would be a 4-slot ding for them there. That being said, the Duke women also saw a similar decrease, and a lot of Tech's individual points were on the diving side, men's and women's, just in terms of Max Fowler, Anna Bradescu, Elijah Clyer, all being pretty elite contributors to this team, and Platform Dimig having not a lot of seat times there. So there's some variance to it there, but the women I do think pencil out a little bit lower than you otherwise would have expected. Then again, on the flip side, You also see Pitt pop up 5 spots from where you might expect. So I guess you know it, if some teams are falling, then you might as well expect it. That being said, I talk about all this expectation and the numbers and adding up the score sheets in front. When you take a look at the actual results versus what you'd expect, the results progress out pretty similar. It's basically a 1-to-1. All the points line up really nicely with a really tight R squared. So I think it's a fair thing to say that the women then are a little bit under where we might have expected. In terms of some individual performances, I noted Max Fowler already. He
Hmm.
did win the ACC title in the 3-meter dive. That
Hey,
is
hey, hey.
great. He was great across the board. Definitely a factor in all 3 events. And let me check my notes here. He might have been Tech's top overall. Yeah, he was Tech's top overall individual score
Yeah.
with 72 points. He's only exceeded by that of relays. Relays as a bunch because they
Yes.
all come back as being GTA.
Yep. Yep.
But he was a top finisher there. Burke Saka also one to note. He got second in the 200 IM. That's awesome. That'll position him really well for maybe some postseason action there. Other top total points getters: Leandro Odorici. He had 25. Just seeing if anything else pops off the page here. Oh yeah, Mert Kilavus with 29
Hmm.
points. He's actually one that had a relatively slow seed time. He way outswam what you might expect by placing really nicely in the 1650 free, the mile freestyle. That's always really been his event. But he and Burke also they both in terms of improvement from what you might expect seed time wise and points wise, they made up a ton of ground on those 2 events, and those were really good to see. Really good to see there. I'd say that generally tech skewed a little slower than seed time, so to see Antonio Romero with his finish in the 100 butterfly, that was really big. Ben Gerhard in the mile, he finished with 12 points there. Elijah Clyer in the 3-meter diving, and then Burke and Mert. Just really excellent excellent performances from those guys there. And then one thing to note, Anna Bradescu fifth in the platform, also another really
Yeah.
solid finish there. So,
Yeah. I feel Fowler, Saka, and Kilovos are going to be, if we're going to score at NCAAs, it's going to be the three of them in some form or
yep,
fashion. And Saka has been very good in the 200 IM. He's swimming at the Olympics as well. So this is his event. This is in the pool, the swimming pool. That is the event we're going to have any shot at some sort of a final, maybe at the national level, and hopefully Max does
yeah.
the same for diving as on the diving side as well. Uh,
And there's got to be something right with how they're doing distance training. If you kind of think about the expected versus the actual, there really weren't too many places where Tech exceeded the expected points in terms of the
mhm.
actual results. But 3 of them were all men in the 1650 freestyle. Charlie Perks, he also was on that list, and then Mertz 500 as well was also really good. So whatever they're doing for distance and diving.
It's
Really
working.
excellent job. Yeah,
We'll
keep
we'll get
keep that up.
we're gonna come back to this in a second. Let me just go through what we have coming up next. They have a last chance meet listed on their schedule, but where that is, don't know. I guess they can technically do it themselves if they want to, just to
Yeah.
get times in. So if they even don't, I know they've gone to Auburn for that. Maybe they've gone to Florida in the past for that too. But at
I
worst,
think UGA too as well
UJ, that
has
makes
had one
sense.
out there.
So
Yeah.
if no one's doing it, at worst, just have it's pretty informal. Just get whoever, get some times up, put some timing walls up, and you're good to go.
Yep.
So Zone B diving championships are March 8th to 10th in Auburn. That's going to be the big day for Bradescu and Fowler to get to the big NCAAs. Uh, Score well there, they're on to the big meets. Uh, you've got an NCAA prognostication here when it comes to the A and B cuts. I see.
Yeah. I think I wrote no A cuts, but Mert and Burke were high enough that I
They
think
definitely got to
I
have
may
some.
have
Yeah,
I was gonna say that's at least an invited 2024 cut. So I'm
yeah,
I'm not too worried about that. And
yeah.
for those of you who don't follow swimming like we are one to do on this here podcast, if you get one A cut, you get invited to swim all of your events that you have a B cut in as well.
Mhm.
So Burke getting one means he gets a couple more you know, couple more shots at getting a couple more points in other events. same with Mert there. So that would really be the key is just getting that invite and diving works a little differently. Maybe I would argue more like one would expect.
Yeah.
If you qualify and finish a top X number of spots, you're in. Max Fowler has, of course, positioned himself really nicely with some excellent diving through the year. Anna Bradescu as well. I think keep an eye out for both of those. Maybe some edge cases like Joao Caballero. He
Yep.
might be
Yep.
somebody that's in the mix. I think Antonio Romero possibly as well. Not sure how much other action there. Maybe a Leandro Otorici, but yeah, it's going to be the same couple of names that you'd expect. I think in terms of those invite 24 cuts, I'd have to go through it
Yeah.
and really you know check out other conferences results to get a true feel for that. But Mert and Burke, in addition to the divers,
We're
would
getting
be the
close to
top.
the end of this little era here we had of the Turkish/Brazilian contingent that all swam together
Yep.
at that NCAA meet at Tech in 2022 and kind of kept it
Hmm.
was like the oh man, this team might be here kind of thing and at least back into a better spot than they were. So it's sad to see Burke be at the end of the run here. I've enjoyed seeing him swim. The big news
Yeah.
here, and kind of back on the diving front. So John Ames took over as the interim swim and dive coach this year for the Jackets after Courtney Hart-Shealy left the team. And he is now the permanent Bergmark Swimming and Diving Georgia Tech head coach for here on out. He's been at Tech for a while, anyways, as the dive coach. Obviously, has been a massive impact there, getting our guys to where they are. Now the program is his. Again, Jake, just take the floor here, and you're gonna know a lot more than I will on this guy.
Yeah, and I want to frame this first with, I think we kind of were like, oh, the men held serve, they're the ninth ranked in the coaches poll in the ACC. They finished ninth, yada yada yada. The women maybe not as good, but at the end of the day, for him to be thrust into the role as head coach the first week of school, basically, with a roster that was not his, he inherited a pretty tough hand, I would
Yep.
say.
Yep.
Granted, all the talent was there. You can't really control a scratch in a key event or something like that, or just kind of an unfortunate DQ at ACCs. That's not the thing that'll, I think, move the needle for Georgia Tech swimming to kind of
Hmm.
maybe take a step forward. But if we're being quite frank, the individual results on this team have never been an issue. And the men's team's been consistently really successful. The puzzling thing to me has always been that the women just never like say what you will about the men being, 25th to 20th in the country.
Hmm.
It's the Ben King problem, and we're going to be coming
Yep.
back to this a million ways to Sunday. You can't complain about a top 25 team like that.
No, not at
They're
all.
they're
Yep.
reasonably successful and they're doing all right. But the fact that the women could never match that under Courtney Sheely Hart, Coach Hart, just I don't really know how that jived, and I'm really eager to see somebody who's really familiar with the program.
Yep.
He's been here since before the women's team was created.
He has been here for 24. He's been here for
Yeah,
24 years.
pretty
24
pretty
years here.
sure pretty sure it
Yeah.
was '02 or '03. That was the first year that Tech fielded a women's swim and diving program. So let that sink in. This guy's been around the block, and if there's one constant that we've had over the years, and Jack's noted, the men have had really strong pipeline to Turkey, really strong pipeline to Brazil. But I want to point out Cami Hidalgo, Ruben Lechuga, Max Fowler, Anna Bradescu. A lot
Hmm.
of Tech's big scorers consistently, especially the last 5, 6 years, have really come from the diving. I mean, shoot, it's something we saw even just this past weekend.
Yep.
I'm eager. I think it's going to really depend on, maybe making sure that the swimming side of the equation pencils out, but that's something you can figure out. He'll have the opportunity to hire a staff or at least have control as attrition happens. And
Hmm.
hey, if you can recruit a Ruben Lechuga or a Max Fowler as a diving coach, I'm eager to see what can happen on the swimming side because I think there's really a ton of untapped potential at Georgia Tech. We say it in a lot of sports. It sounds like a cliche, but swimmers want to swim in a really nice facility. They want to get a good education. There's no place that has that combination better than Georgia Tech. So.
Absolutely. I do want to note in the press release they did note there were 9 school records set this year, and only one of them was a men's record. That was our 200 free relay. Otherwise, Bradescu got the platform diving record. Anita Stanislavievich got the 50 free record. Vivian Rothwell got the 100 back record. Phoebe Wright got the 200 back record. And then there was 4 women's relays records set. So the progress is still
And
coming on the women's side. It's just not all the way to that point we know the men have
yep.
been those last few years.
I think that's both a sign of where those records were as well as where they could
Yes.
go, if that
Yes.
makes sense. The women
Yes.
have had some
Exactly.
individual standout performers, but just the depth and relative to and this is kind of something you see from women swimming in general, I think a little bit too, is there's just a lot more programs, so that talent gets spread out more.
Right. Yep.
And it makes it tougher if you're not a Virginia. I mean, there's so many schools in this
Yeah, it's
conference
unfair. It's
where
unfair when the U.S. national team also swims at one school.
like
They swim at one school,
like
and Tori House at Stanford. But nonetheless,
I
yeah,
it's and we're gonna call the men's swimming equivalent the Ben King problem. I'm gonna call the women's swimming equivalent almost like the Georgia Tech men's tennis problem, where it's like, oh yeah, like you're pretty good and you got some talent, and every once in a while you're gonna have a truly excellent person come along, Chris Eubanks, who was incredible. But the neighborhood they're competing in right now is just bonkers. I mean,
yeah,
you're up against a bunch of really, really, really phenomenal teams, and I think that made for good swimming this weekend. I mean, probably
yeah,
not as quick of a taper at writ large as we might have expected, but I mean the ACCs are a great meet, and I think them going co-ed I think helped the vibes in a good amount too, just in
yeah.
terms of like
Good point.
atmosphere
Good point.
type situation. So
Good point. To finish out, golf got 4th at the Watersound Invitational. Florida State ran away with this event, so we were not really competitive for the team win. But Ben Reuter was 4 shots back, finished T4th, and Carson Kim and Albert Hansen finished T22nd. So it's generally a pretty good showing from the guys that we've been wanting to see. Akshay, I realize you haven't talked in 25 minutes. Do you have any final notes before we sign off here?
All right, look, it hasn't been 25 minutes since he started talking about swimming. But the only other thing, the thing that I wanted to touch on before we got away from swimming, and I missed the cutoff there, is if I told you, if you're an international student, and I told you, man, there are 2 schools in the state of Georgia that host NCAA swimming programs, and one of them swims at a former Olympic facility. Would you which one would you be which one would you guess it was? Right? Like that I
Right.
haven't framed this question properly.
Well, I mean,
But like
yeah.
oh,
you
I
get
get
what
what
I'm
you're
saying.
saying though.
You get what I'm saying? Though or if I ask you like which one is the good one, you would I assume the person would say
Yeah.
the one with the former Olympic pool.
Yeah.
It's not, right? And I think all 3 of us are pretty honest about that. I think honestly all 3 of us are pretty frustrated by that at some level. And it's I think there's work to be done in order to. I mean, look, like you're not going to be able to compete with a on day one with a team, day one of a new coaching staff with a team that is consistently putting talent both into the U.S. World Championships teams and the U.S. Olympic teams, right? Like that's not
We're not beating
those
that.
are not
Yeah.
like immediately realistic goals, but in the
Yeah.
long arc of the program, in the long arc of that tenure, right? The and yes, this doesn't just have to be U.S. specific, but the goal has to be to create swimmers that compete at the highest level of the sport, which is ostensibly the Olympics. And to both of your points, like Tech is putting swimmers into the Turkish Olympic team, right? Men swimmers into the Turkish Olympic team. Now they have to not to equivocate Olympic teams, but they have to put swimmers at higher and higher levels of Olympic team, both on the men's side, and they have to start putting swimmers into higher and higher tiers of Olympic team on the women's side.
Yeah.
And that I think is at least a reasonable success metric to track. Obviously, it gets a little harder when you only have Olympics every 4 years. Maybe we use the World Championships
I think
every
yeah, I
few
think
years to track,
yeah,
but like,
yeah, use that.
but those are the kinds of metrics that I think make like lower the gap, right, or decrease the gap that we're talking about, especially on the women's side.
Yeah.
Between a current day Georgia Tech and like getting into that second tier of ACC swimming teams, right?
Yeah, and I want to put this out there because it's something I think we all think about a lot, and you guys can correct me if I'm speaking for you both. But like one thing that I struggle with in having this podcast and talking about this with our platform is you'd be hard pressed to find people who are, you know, more wanting to see these teams succeed. And it's to the like effect of I don't want to knock great accomplishments or, like
Right.
not have that push for more. And I also don't want people to think like, oh man, they didn't win it all, so these men must be washed. No, that like they're a good team. They're a really high quality program, and it's the same thing we kind of beat around the bush about with softball. They're in an interesting spot and they're trying to figure it all out, and they're not. There's a lot of season left to play, right?
Yeah, it relatively just looks so
Yeah.
different because we just face all of the other best teams all of the time. Like
Yeah, like
you do some other universe conference realignment. Who knows how high up we are in whatever version of the whatever conference we're in, kind of thing.
yeah.
Like this is the hand we're dealt, and we're playing into that hand as well as we can. It just feels you have the weird feelings of, hey, this is good, and yet the scoreboard doesn't show it at the same time.
Yeah. Dear listener, we don't want to equivocate on your and assume your attachment to these teams, but take it from us as three swammers. We want to see we want to see this team do
Whoa,
real,
whoa,
real
whoa,
well.
whoa.
And
Don't give me too much credit here. Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bob.
Oh man. And
yeah.
dear listener, if you have $1 million to recruit some swimmers, we'll take it. Anyways, I think although Dick Bergmark's one of the best donors to tech in general, so I think they're all right in that department. So I think we're fine.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think that's it. Great. Hey, you know what? Great episode. I'm gonna say great episode. We got through a lot of stuff. We made some good points. I think I'm giving us an A. Jake, take us home, please.
Yeah, as always, you can find this podcast and other great content from our staff at FromTheRumbleSeat.com. You can email us from therumble@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts. I know I always say that summer's coming up, but really, it always is. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that what we're saying is what you guys want to hear. You can find us on Blue Sky. I'm at Jake Grant98. Jack's at Jack Nicholas. You can find FTRS there as well at FTRS blog, section 103 at section103.com. Remember code FTRS. Tell them we sent you. You can find From the Rumble Seat on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at From the Rumble Seat. And then again, podcasts, wherever fine podcasts are distributed. Tell your friends. Word of mouth is the very best way for people to find out about what we're doing here. And we really do appreciate it. Till we speak again, good night, good luck, and go Jackets.